The following production is intended for entertainment purposes only. We are not legal professionals. We do not speak for any government agency, and the opinions expressed here are our own. Relax.
Heck yeah, it is. My mans, what's up?
What's up, boys?
Yo, yo.
Yeah, in case you didn't recognize that first voice, that's my big brother, man. I'm
Big brother.
so freaking excited to have him on here and really to introduce him to you, Clayton, because
Now,
you're
it
one of my
much
favorite dudes, and he's my best brother. You know,
is it pronounced T-Pac or T-Pac?
T-Pac.
T-Pac. Okay.
Yes. Obviously, after the supposedly late great Tupac,
Fake news.
certainly great, supposedly late. Speaking of, I mean, you might as well just jump in. Speaking of gangster rap, dude, is anybody following like the beef between 50 Cent and basically everybody?
Gosh, dang it. He does this a lot.
We got to get him off dial-up.
I know. Just connect.
But like
Just
what
put a plug of
everything
wire.
No, here's what I need. Here's what I need to happen. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Test it. Okay, here's what I need to happen. I need for my son to quit playing GTA with his PlayStation friends, and my daughter to quit streaming whatever she's streaming, and my wife to quit streaming music. I mean, obviously, yeah, whatever we got to share, but that high speed internet doesn't go as far as it used to.
Well, I mean, I assume you guys are making a ton of money off this podcast. So can you not just like up your can you not up your internet speed? Is that the issue?
There's a plan. Like I
There's
could
talks.
see the very real possibility of making dozens of dollars.
Dozens of dollars. That's
yeah.
yeah.
Both of us, or like just as a whole.
Dozens. Well, we'll get
Projected over 10 years.
We
Split.
don't-
Yeah.
I don't think
Don't
we
let
wanna start-
Yoko Ono break up the band here, okay? We gotta.
I don't think we want to
We
start
gotta stay
talking about
together.
talking about money just yet. But what I do want to keep talking about, though, I don't know if it at what point I froze up, but the beef with 50 Cent and basically everybody, but like with Jay-Z and 50 Cent was pretty loud about Puff Daddy, and there's somebody I can't remember, but yeah, he's just kind of
He's
out there looking for fights.
He's a huge troll, I think. Like
I think you're
I
right.
think he loves just like did you ever hear the story about how 50 Cent bought out like the first 4 or 5 rows at a Ja Rule concert so they'd be
Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome.
empty? The man
That
taking
is so
money out
awesome.
of his own pocket just to dunk on a guy.
That is awesome.
Still, like 20 years later, still.
Yeah, undefeated.
I think I'd forgotten about that. Wasn't, and maybe I'm misremembering, but like he was a gangster, right?
He was a drug dealer. Yeah.
Yeah, and he got shot a bunch of times. And I'm pretty sure that record that he kind of hit big with, "Get Rich or Die Trying," I think was a lot about that life. So I think he was about as legit as they come in terms of street cred.
He was about it.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, that's kind of just a brief little sidetrack. But what have you guys been up to?
Hey, no, you can't split it like that.
What do you mean?
I haven't given any thought. There's still plenty of conversation to have here. You can't just squirrel immediately. I was gonna say I think 50 Cent is a Machiavellian genius.
Yeah. He's smart.
Kinda.
Okay, lay it on me.
He rewrote the 48 Laws of Power and made like the 50th Law of Power with Robert Greene. Do you know that author, Robert Greene?
I know the name.
He's a pretty smart dude. Robert Greene is. Are you getting me, Justin?
Yeah, I'm getting you. I'm not sure if
Well,
I'm thinking my screen's frozen.
Robert Greene is he's been an author for a long time, but he wrote like a lot of the Laws of Power series, like 48 Laws of Power and the 50 Laws of Power. It's based off of Machiavelli.
Yeah.
And the Stoicism a lot. He was into Robert Greene talks about the Stoics a lot. So he's kind of like a modern, like he's been writing for a couple decades now, I think, but like a modern philosopher-ish type guy. And 50 Cent is tied in with him.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So and 50 Cent has talked about this on some of it, like podcasts and interviews, but he's definitely not an academic, 50 Cent. Not, he wouldn't profess to be, but he's very smart and very wise, very strategic.
Didn't he make like $1 billion off vitamin water or something like that? He was like one of the early I don't know if he founded the company or was an early investor, but he made a shit ton of money off that deal.
He still so he was on the Andrew Schultz podcast not too long ago, and talked about all these new venture capital things that he's got going on. He's going to be buying or he already bought a sports team, one of the basketball teams. I don't know which one, but he's going to be rebuilding this arena with like a lot of the rappers from hip hop people from his time, like the Ja Rule, that era. And it's going to be like exhibits ice cream in his arena, or he's bringing in a lot of these people to try to boost up. Like he's got a lot of games going. He's got a lot of pots in the fire.
Are there any other genres that have so many like venture capitalists or like investment, like startup type? Like think about like when you think of hip hop and you think of like everything that Dr. Dre is involved in, and even Ice-T or 50 Cent, like there's so much
Ice
other
Cube.
industry.
Ice Cube, Jay-Z.
I don't know that, like
Beyonce.
Think about like rock and roll. Are there any rock stars that own teams or businesses?
Yeah, there's some. I mean, Sammy Hagar made a ton of money off his tequila company, his Cabo Wabo brand tequila company. He sold that for a lot of money, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars. I think he might have made $500 million on that.
Dang.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it was a lot. It was a lot. And then, I don't know about, just within the music industry, a lot of athletes are big investors. Shaquille O'Neal owns a ton of Papa John's and a ton of Krispy Kremes,
But Shaquille O'Neal also released an album called Shaq Fu. So
that's true.
he falls on
he is
falls
a hip-hop.
on the
Yeah, that's
hip-hop.
true.
But he was
That's
he
true.
was not the genie in Shazam,
Clearly or allegedly.
right?
Actually, I don't know that. I'm familiar with that joke, but I don't remember.
Well, it was Kazam, I think, was the movie Shaq was in, but the Mandela effect, the Mandela effect, everybody always remembers Sinbad in a movie called Shazam, I think, if I'm remembering that correctly.
Thought Shaq was part. Okay, well, I'm mixing my Mandelas.
I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure Shaq was actually in a movie called Kazam, but everybody thinks Sinbad was in a similar movie that may or may not exist. I still can't get a straight answer because I think somebody on Reddit had a picture of it one time, but nobody's ever seen the movie.
Well, I can absolutely confirm there's no doubt that Sinbad was in a movie called Shazam. Period, paragraph. I know that for a fact. Okay. So whatever that means about Shaq, I don't know.
Okay,
but I know this
because we may be dealing with some merged timelines here. Because I'm not sure about that either.
Yeah.
So T-Pac, give me like what should we know about you for like our dozens of listeners to introduce yourself?
Okay. I am, my Christian name is Travis. That's what my mom and dad gave me. Justin calls me T-Pac, T-Bone, Big Worm. There's been a number of, T-Rav. Yeah, there's been a number of nicknames over the years. What you should know about me. I'm married. I've got 5 children and a grandchild. Which all keeps me very, very busy. I work in IT. I'm a project manager for a home builder out here in Atlanta. I am a huge fan of movies in general, horror movies in particular, over the past couple of years, I seem to have kind of settled into that as a niche. So I enjoy going to the movies. I'd love to play video games when I have time. Huge fan of music. Justin and I have talked a lot about music over the years, and I have him to thank, I think, for some of my favorite artists. So
They're all ska bands.
Mostly ska. You know,
Travis,
if you know Justin at
Travis,
all,
I'm
you
so
know it's
sorry to
mostly
tell you
ska.
I'm so
Lots of
sorry to tell
horns.
you this, Travis, because I know that I've built Clayton up to you, and I love the guy. I really do. He's one of the wisest guys I know.
Yeah.
Lots of
But
drop kicks.
he has got the worst taste in music. I just don't get it. Like he's just, it's like
A lot of
sometimes I think
Boston
he's
dudes with kilts.
sometimes I think he's joking because he's so wrong, but he's just so smart. It's fucking weird.
So should I surmise here that Clayton is not a fan of the ska?
I don't know what he's a fan of. He's a fan of shitty music is all I know.
Because I do love some ska. I'm not gonna lie, I do love some. I'll get down with some Five Iron Frenzy.
No,
if
it's
we're,
cool.
if we're
I'm
talking
glad
church music.
I'm glad you admit it.
Hey,
Justin has this weird denial.
Unabashedly, yeah.
dude,
Okay, good.
you just said something that I want to talk about, and I don't know if we're going to be able to do it now and tonight, whatever. We need to talk about Christian music, because I mean, you and I, Travis, I think that we could win like $1 million on a Christian music trivia show. I know we could. But
I guarantee you the pot wouldn't be that big.
no,
There's
because
no funding for that project.
It would be sponsored by Murr Records.
The better sponsored by the Better Book Room in Wichita.
Right, a couple of gift certificates.
Yeah,
one of them's a sketchy massage place that you're not. Anyway, but Clayton is also he's got some CCM roots to him too. So I want to talk about that.
Yeah,
CCM.
Sure. Contemporary
CCM?
Christian music.
Okay.
See, if we called it Christian rock, we weren't allowed to listen to it because rock music is of the devil. But contemporary
even
Christian music,
rock.
CCM, was the preferred nomenclature at our house.
There's really no such thing as Christian rock, because that's like saying Christian sin. So
Exactly. Justin gets it.
Clayton, what were you saying?
No, I was just saying, every time that it gets pointed out, I always thought, I grew up as a Pentecostal kid, Church of God.
Yeah.
And I always thought, almost like as a mantra, I would say, we're more alike than we are different. Like us Baptist kids, you know, and the Presbyterians and the Methodists, we're all more alike. I hear a lot of this religious trauma stories from Justin. I'm like, oh, we didn't have that. We had our own different thing.
That's another thing we need to talk about. Is
we were a little less culty. We were not as culty. We were more crazy. We weren't culty. At least that's what my spin on it. You guys would win in the Christian trivia, because I think Pentecostals were always the bad Christian kids. Like we listened to contemporary music and smoke cigarettes.
Pentecostals would smoke in the parking lot. And
Hell
that's
yeah,
about all
they
you
would.
need to know.
Yep.
That says
They knew how to party for sure.
Yeah.
T-Pac, so I interrupted you earlier. You had gotten to, we need to know that you love good music.
Yeah, love good music. Honestly, I love bad music too. I just kind of love all sorts of music.
You've already said that.
Yeah,
with ska.
Established.
If you love bad music, then stick around. Clayton's got some suggestions for you.
I don't know what else you guys need. I mean, if somebody sat down with me to have a beer, that would be enough to probably get us through the evening, I think.
Well, so you grew up in Derby?
Thereabouts, yeah. We kind of moved around a lot when we were kids. So Derby, Wichita, Rose Hill, but the general Sedgwick County, Butler County area.
Okay. And that was early 90s when you were coming up out there?
Yeah. I graduated high school in 93, so late 80s, early 90s were kind of my formative years.
Fair to say that Wichita is pretty different than back then.
Oh yeah. I left Wichita thinking I was never going to come back. I mean, you know, obviously for visits and such, but I did not consider it a viable place to establish roots again. But I've turned the corner on that. I don't know that it'll ever happen, but I could see it now that it's grown up a lot since I've been gone.
Sure. But in some ways, it's this exact same.
In some ways, I think it'll always be Wichita, Kansas.
Yeah, sure will. I interrupted you, Justin. What?
Oh, I was just going to say, I actually don't know the answer to this, that you were homeschooled for a majority of your school, but when did you start being homeschooled?
So we started homeschooling when I was in the 5th grade. I finished 4th grade in Rose Hill, and then I was homeschooled from then until I graduated high school.
Was this religious homeschooling?
Yes. I think the simple answer is yes. That's probably a little more nuanced because we didn't have like there are homeschool curriculums that are put out by different Christian colleges and such, and we never had a
Hillsdale.
Yeah, Pensacola, Bob Jones. We never had like a cohesive, top to bottom curriculum. Mostly, I think because we probably were priced out of it. But we would get, a science book from this publisher and a history book from this publisher, generally all from fundamentalist evangelical sources. And then, I don't know if there's such a thing as Christian math. I think the math was just math, but everything else.
Maybe Saxon math is what it was.
That's what it was. Yeah. But I think that was probably used in some public school somewhere.
Yeah.
We got a waiver for that one.
Man, how good were encyclopedias? I got encyclopedias sitting in a tote in the garage, but I catch myself. I'm like, you kids are never gonna know how good it was.
I'll tell you what.
Encyclopedia.
Over a lifetime of sometimes dumb financial decisions, one of the last big ones I made was buying an encyclopedia about a year before the internet hit. We bought the full set from a door-to-door salesman and thought, man, we're setting our kids up for success. And then, Google dropped about a year later, and it was like, well, that's $1,500 down the drain, and that's $1,500 in 1996. So that was real money. We financed that shit.
If you'd gotten the Encyclopedia Britannica from that, remember that long-haired,
floppy-haired kid?
Yeah,
with the glasses.
I feel like he had a pretty good deal on those.
Yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, don't feel too bad. I financed many, many years into Google, like 2007. I financed an encyclopedia kit that came with like these, the DSMR and these medical journals.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And came with a bunch that I did, by the way. I did crack those open just to thumb through it.
Well, I mean, when it all hits the fan and we're neck deep in the apocalypse, those encyclopedias are going to be the only thing that keeps our history alive. Once the grid goes down,
for real,
joke's going to be on everyone who didn't buy a set.
I hope they're at least like updated every now and again, because I have a feeling that what they knew about whatever in 1991 is significantly less than what they know about it in 2024.
That's fair.
Man,
that's fair.
I'm listening to this 12-hour lecture series on Audible about first Native Americans in North America, or the first people in North America. And this thing was put out like 2 years ago. There's already information that I know listening to this now that pushes the timeline back from what this author is saying. And this is like Stanford. I don't remember his name. He did a masterclass with Audible about the first people. And he, like, the yard line that he says was at 30,000. He's like, the earliest we can possibly conceive that most academics say now is there were people in North America 30,000 years ago. But I know from listening to people speak before that nowadays, like in 2024, it's closer to 50.
That's interesting. What do you guys think? Justin, you and I were talking about this the other day. Like, it seems like there's a generation, and I don't want to pigeonhole anybody, but it seems like there's a generation that doesn't really accept and process new information, right?
Yeah.
Like they're kind of stuck in their, this is what we know, this is what we believe, and I'll say at least the percentage of people who are younger than that, and myself included, have been much more pliable in terms of changing what we believe. And it could be religion, it could be politics, it could be something as simple as what you were talking about, Clayton. Just, well, I learned this in school, so nobody's going to convince me now that it's different.
Right.
And I wonder why that is.
Man, I just wonder, and maybe they wouldn't know that, maybe they wouldn't think this, but I wonder if there's just a point where it's like too much of your life is based on it.
Mm.
Like just like
you got
like
too much skin in the game to change
Yeah.
your perspective now.
I mean, I don't think anybody
whole world was based off of their views.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think anybody would like make that calculation and say, well, I've got 53 years invested, so I'm not, but I do wonder if that's not a big part of it.
Yeah. I think that's true to a degree though of everybody at a certain point, right? Like when you're a kid, my kids grew up being much more sensitive to maybe certain social issues. There are probably words that I said when I was a kid that I don't say anymore, and my kids would never say, right? Because they've just been raised in a time and place where they know that we just don't say that, right?
Right.
So at some point, as a child, you believe basically what you're told to believe, and then at some point, you maybe start to fiddle with the dials a little bit, and you start figuring out what you believe on your own. But it just seems to me that it's almost like a state of arrested development for some folks who just can't quite make the jump to believe something despite an abundance of reliable information that tells them, hey, this is what you used to believe, but we now know that to be wrong.
Well, I mean, if you think about it, it took the 60s to really knock America off of the kind of conservative railroad tracks that it was going on post World War II. And it had to take a whole cultural revolution that may or may not have been fueled by CIA, LSD, but yeah, it had to take that hippie generation to knock America, to begin to get them off of that Eisenhower, you know what I mean, post World War II baby boom track that they were on. And also, we're closer to, we were younger at this giant increase of information that there was just nothing like it. And there has been nothing like it. Like I said, from 2 years ago to now, we know, this thing about the Native Americans. We're closer to it's more normal for us to learn about some fundamental changes and be like, oh, that might be true. I guess the Old Testament wasn't what I thought it was.
I think that's a really good point, and something I was going to bring up earlier, and it came back around, that we talk a lot about how information is compounding, and like we're learning so much more than we've learned before, but also the speed that we're learning information is also compounded, and it's getting faster and faster and faster. And
it feels like we're not ready for that, right?
I mean, it's
like,
like
we're not adapting well.
Somebody keeps pushing the speed up, and we're like falling down on the treadmill. Kind of getting banged up against the wall.
Think about this disinformation thing or fake news.
But anyway,
I was going to say, think about this disinformation or fake news thing. Like you kind of can't blame some people for being on all sides of this, because one, people are like, hey, I got a doctorate in this. motherfucker, I know what I'm talking about. And the other person was like, yeah, well, I just watched a YouTube video with 10 doctors on it, and they said this, and you've been caught fibbing before. And also what my professor told me, I know now is wrong because of this or that. All this new information is coming at us. We're not processing it well as a
No.
people.
We're
Not
not.
to mention just the ability to have fake, to produce very believable fake information, videos or voice reproductions that if you don't know, you would never know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like maybe there's different iterations of this, right? But like, I'm trying to think of, from where we're about to go now with AI, right? Like,
Yeah.
I first heard about AI like as a consumer concept, right? I had heard of artificial intelligence for years, really, but didn't really have a concept of what it was, right? And then ChatGPT comes out 2 or 3 years ago, maybe, and you start seeing crazy Instagram videos where AI is doing weird stuff, and then you fast forward to today, and to Justin's point, the AI on your phone can create true to life images based on a verbal description that I speak into it. Now, there are still some telltale clues, right? If you know enough about it, you can say this looks like AI, but a lot of people don't. And a lot of people see that and they don't have the tools to determine whether it's real or not. So I feel like the rate at which we're accelerating over the past couple years is staggering to me.
Yeah. It even makes you question, like, what is art and what is creation anymore? Because, like, the knee jerk reaction is to say, well, if AI made it, that's not art. You know what I mean? If a human didn't make it, it's not art. Which, I can see an argument against that, or for and against that. But what if an artist is using AI?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I am not a writer by any means, but I'm using Chat GPT to outline an idea of a book, and I'm giving it ideas and giving it like paragraphs, and I'm typing up stuff and copying and pasting into there. I'm like, make another paragraph in this voice, make three, and I'll proofread them. And I'm just farting around. Now, what about someone who's been in publishing for 20 years, or, you know what I mean, a Dean Koontz or some guy? What could they do with that?
Mm-hmm.
Where does it cross the line of art and not art, even if they're using AI?
Yeah. It's a good question. I know when I think about people who are afraid of AI, it seems like it's mostly the artists, right? And for good reason, right? Because that's their livelihood. And they they put their blood, sweat, and tears over their lifetime to develop a craft, and are loath to see a computer come along and put them out of a job. And also they have a sense of how much of their soul they pour into it, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And that means something. But I certainly think there's applications for it. I use it a lot in my job. Because a lot of what I do is write emails. I'm an IT project manager, and frankly, if I can have a computer write my emails for me, and all I have to do is, tweak it a little bit, maybe change a few things here and there, and it saves me, a quarter of my day, absolutely, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's very nuanced, and I think it's going to take a while for us to sort out what place that's going to have, particularly in the arts. I don't know that to your point that it doesn't have any place, but I understand why people are scared of it.
Well, it's not going anywhere.
Yeah,
it's only going to get more and more. So that if they're, and there does need to be a human hand in it, but they're going to have to adapt. They're going to have to learn how to bring it on, and I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
Not to try to make it too sci-fi or whatever, but I do think that, well, it's gonna
Is there an
create
earthquake there right now?
yeah, sorry. I think you're gonna have to question what's reality, because what is reality? If I just saw a video of you drinking Diet Coke, and that's reality, and then you tell me you can prove that you didn't, and it was AI, whatever, like a deep fake video,
You still saw me drinking Coke.
it was still reality, and that is reality until it's now proved otherwise, and so that's going to be weird. But
And I think that in particular seems pretty insidious to me, like in terms of the implications, because
Oh yeah.
we've already established there's a lot of people in this country who either can't or don't care to try to discern what's true.
Yeah.
And so, flooding the zone with, honestly, I'm surprised we didn't see more of it, or maybe it just didn't come across my algorithm, on the various platforms or whatever. But it's good enough now that you could really do a lot of damage with it, I think, in terms of, making people appear to say things that they never said, making people appear to be places they never were. There's a lot of really destructive possibilities.
But doesn't it seems like there's also a weird renaissance, and I'd be interested, T-Pac, I'd be interested to know what you think about the political version of this that I want to bring up. But there's like a weird renaissance in count and local fairs, handcrafted arts, and like all the local artists. There is a renaissance in that, even at the same time as this huge techno boom, because I feel like we're recognizing that's more valuable.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to bring it back to the topic of music a little bit, I started collecting vinyl a few years ago.
Dude, yeah.
And I do it for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I know that the bands that I see don't get paid shit from Apple Music or from Spotify, right? So if I go to a concert and I spend $30 on a band's record that I like, there's a band called American Aquarium that Justin introduced me to, and their singer BJ Barham says that one $30 album is worth about 8,000 streams on Spotify. So
wow,
for me, that's a very direct way that I can support independent musicians that I like.
Heck yeah.
But also, I like the tactile feel of it. I like holding it in my hand. I like looking at the cool colors that they make the records nowadays. I like reading the liner notes, like all the stuff that I did when I was a kid that all went away. And I still listen to 90% of my music on Apple Music or Spotify, just because that's how we live our lives now, right? I don't have a record player in my car, but there is
big horn on it.
big gramophone duct tape to the dashboard. But no, but there's something to be said for things that feel handcrafted, right? And it's not just music, it's art, it's furniture, it's clothing, it's whatever. There's always, or at least I hope there's always going to be a place for that, because there's a lot of that stuff's really beautiful.
Yeah, it seems like a version of the rejection of that, like mainstream. I'm gonna start throwing around some buzzwords. That mainstream media, I have associated with like AI, big production, consumer information, versus going out and beating up rallies and freestyling and just saying a bunch of shit. You know what I mean? But that it gets people fired up.
Yeah.
That's almost a version of this rejection. The rejection of the rejection of mainstream, the rejection of the pop, the rejection of even if it does make sense, I don't want to hear it. Or, or I caught you in this one thing, and whatever it is. I think what we just saw was a version of that rejection.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of people who, I'm not sure exactly how to say this, but I want to say something.
You're not going to hurt our feelings.
I want to say something along the lines of they see something that they perceive as authentic
Yep.
whether it's true or not. It feels authentic to them, and everything else feels fake and polished and deep state, big media, whatever you want to call it.
And we're teed up for this from birth with
Sure.
revivals and,
Yeah.
you know, some guy coming into town talking smooth.
Yeah.
We got
the Music
that.
Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, our parents were more susceptible to that
Mhm.
than we'd like to think. But guess what? They raised us. So
Yeah.
we're still susceptible to it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably like deep down in our lizard brains. Like there's something in us.
Yeah. The alpha.
That there's something in us that recognizes authenticity. I don't know that we always get it right, but we respond to it.
Yeah, me and Justin dealt with that a lot as cops, that gut and how to trust your gut. What we had to learn how to do is articulate that gut. And like, because there are things that your brain picks up on and, you know, maybe even there's ideas that maybe they're part of your thought process is processed in your gut, whatever. But, like, I don't know, man, he was just sketchy. He didn't feel right.
Yeah.
Stop. Let's use our words and explain how he was sketchy. Oh, you think he was high? Let's explain how you think he was high. He was moving his eyes side to side. Okay, let's do that. Let's go from there. He was sweaty. He was fidgety. He was making irrational movements. Okay. That was our experience of dissecting that gut feeling.
Yeah.
And I bet you could do that with a lot of things. There just hasn't been a need to explain the gut feeling.
Yeah.
But yeah, authenticity is definitely a big one. What were your tales, Justin, on picking up deception? Nope, he refuses.
I'm not going to get into this again with you.
I mean, the obvious ones, just shifty eyes. I don't know. I was pretty good about asking. Oh, am I totally frozen?
You're good. We can hear you.
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh,
so
okay.
What we do is we would ask
I don't know, I was pretty good about
baseline
asking clarifying question.
Yeah. I keep jumping on you, man. I'm sorry.
This is ridiculous. I'm gonna have to. I'm just gonna have to cut everybody else
take
off.
That Xbox away
next
from
time.
the boy.
Yep, Sundays are about to suck around here.
It's worse than normal.
Right. Yeah, I don't know how many times this will have recorded me saying this. But yeah, I just generally have a good rapport with people pretty quick, and I don't know, I'm able to pick up on it. And now, so the bad thing about that, like I'm very quick to pick up on bullshit. Like when somebody's faking, or when somebody's acting like they're something they're not, or whatever. The problem is that because I always have been good at it, sometimes I'm wrong, but I just assume that I'm right. And so like sometimes I'm just like, I don't like that guy because he's a fake. And why do you say that? I don't know. I just have a feeling. I mean, maybe I'm right. I think I'm right, obviously, because I'm good at it, but maybe I'm wrong and he's a decent guy.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just an asshole. But
go ahead. Sorry.
So,
it's all right. I can cut some of this out.
Left him speechless.
No, sorry. I realized I was stepping on what you were saying. Then I didn't know if your screen froze or not. But there's something to be said though for that gut, even if you can't explain it.
Yeah.
And then you have to sort of and then you sort of have to think about, well, what's a good guy, right? Because you're picking up on something, right? You're perceiving something that feels inauthentic, or there's something that your subconscious has triggered your subconscious, right? Something set up a red flag.
That survival instincts that we have in the back.
And I probably shouldn't bring this up because I don't have enough of the details to speak to it intelligently, but
That doesn't stop us.
I was
Yeah.
I was listening
Did we not read you in?
I'm kind of coming into this blind. I assumed you guys were like that this was a philosophy based. You guys are both PhDs, right?
Yeah.
Part of that is true. Part of that is true-ish.
Say what you think. That's all.
I'll let you determine which part.
But so the general idea was we as humans have this idea that we have free will. And I it's entirely possible I heard you say this, Clayton, on one of the episodes I listened to. So if I should attribute this to you and I just forgot about it, forgive me. But the idea of free will, meaning I'm going to decide in my brain what I'm going to do, is possibly a little bit of a myth.
Right.
Because those decisions happen almost on a molecular level before our brain realizes what we've decided to do. Right?
Right.
So when you get a feeling about somebody and you can't put your finger on it, I don't necessarily think that means that you yourself decided there's something about this guy that's off. I think your body is telling you that.
And what's important to know is, like your gut, that can be wrong.
Sure.
Like you should trust your instincts, and you should, hone that and trust yourself. But if you get to leaning too much on your own understanding, there's trouble.
That's what the book says.
That'll get you. Did you listen to the episode, Travis, where Clayton went to a Zach Bryan concert and was calling out fake cowboys? You're not a cowboy. You're not a cowboy. You're not a cowboy. You're not.
Cowboys don't wear boots with shorts, ma'am. I'm sorry.
And believe it or not, they didn't like that. That wasn't a hit.
That not big with the Zach Bryan fans.
Yeah. Yeah, but the idea of free will, I think is pretty shaky. Like it with any type of scrutiny from a lot of different angles.
Yeah.
I'd always had that feeling, but well, I don't know if it was the first time, but a big time that I was able to really describe it was when I was getting a degree from Oklahoma in criminal justice, and they were talking about modeling theory and how even excluding epigenetics, which can take up a big portion of your decision making and your behavior, which would be nature, or from your parent, right? Epigenetics would be inherited. Even cutting that out, just from a baby, seeing how the world around you, how these big people make decisions, how they talk, how they communicate, the timing, the language, your diet, your environment. That I say literally too much, not literally. It actually wires your brain and tells you how to make decisions. The world around you and the people in the environments and the situations that when your brain is most forming, that's what forms it. And so that is what's directing your decisions. That makes you your own little special snowflake, but that's not you. That's all that other stuff that happened.
Yeah.
So then how can two brothers from the same home, one of them follows this path in IT, leaves home, spreads his wings, has kind of, from what I've heard and, from whatever, making some assumptions, like a classically liberal outlook on life.
Yeah.
Digs good music, in his own opinion, digs, maybe beer, whatever, good things. And the other brother stays home and in a way chases dad, or the idea of dad. I may be pushing something on there, forgive me. But chases the idea of dad, follows in his footsteps, digs into this other identity of like Western evangelical, goes hardcore into the faith, embraces some of the stuff that the other brother rejected.
Yeah.
But you guys were in the same house and had
Yeah.
the same genetics.
Yeah. So honestly, there's a lot to unpack in that question.
Sure.
Um, so I, without boring you too much with the details, I grew up as a Rush Limbaugh conservative Republican, right?
Sweet.
That was my upbringing.
We went bowling on Fridays with Rush Limbaugh in the background because it was like hamburgers and fries and bowling for 2 hours for $5.
You were both eating hamburgers and fries that whole time. You all and
Absolutely.
Rush.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, it probably would take an entire series of episodes to talk about the various ways that I deconstructed my faith and my politics, and they're both deeply intertwined. But I would say that Justin and I, largely, I think, shared a lot of the same points of view for most of our lives. Depending on your perspective, my descent or my ascent into more liberal thought, really kind of started back in 2008 when Barack Obama was elected.
Yeah.
I voted for McCain the first time Obama was elected, and I found myself wishing that I had voted for Obama. But it sort of came apart piece by piece, right? So there were certain issues that I did not see eye to eye with the Republicans on, but I still felt that by and large they better represented the interests of evangelical Christians who were my people, right?
Yeah.
And as I began to around the same time, as I began to sort of see some cracks developing in the foundation of my faith at the time, I started.
How old were you?
I would have been 33 ish.
2006.
2006. Well, it's 2008. I think was probably when I really started to be able to see the cracks.
Yeah.
So late 30s, right? And I'm 49 now, so it's been 15 years ish, something like that. But I was on the same track as Justin was. My plan was to be a police officer of some sort. I was going to be a detective, and had thought about going into the FBI. And then I got married, and my wife said, "No, you're not," because she didn't want the life of a cop's wife, and so I had to pivot there into a different direction. But yeah, it's interesting because there really was there was sort of a point where we diverged, and I don't, Justin, I don't think this is too personal to share. There were a couple of years where I would say that Justin and I were not entirely estranged, but we weren't talking much, because there were some things going on in the world that I probably wasn't very graceful in how I shared my thoughts about those on various social medias, and I think there was some hurt there that he and I have since talked through and reconciled over, but it wasn't an easy journey.
Man, I remember I was in Afghanistan this one time, and it was when I was going through like a dark place. But there was this dude that I really liked. His name's Josh Gill. He might listen to this. He's not one of those Gills, but he's a buddy of mine, Josh Gill. He's from Georgia, and he was one of the first dudes I had seen that had been in my life like this. But he was a smart, red-blooded American dude, liked beer. He liked lifting weights. He always made fun of me. He said I didn't go far enough down on my squats. He worked for USAID. He was an NGO guy, but he was a liberal. And I was like, man, how can you be like this? Well, one time God came up and he was like, hey, man, that's just like a bedtime story to make people feel good. And at that moment, I was like, oh, we can't be friends anymore.
Right.
Like, we're done. And I kind of did that.
Yeah.
I kind of did that. Like, oh, like since then, that relationship, we didn't really talk after Afghanistan, but even the rest of the time in Afghanistan, I looked at him a lot different.
Yeah.
Like, just that he would feel the audacity to say that to me.
Well, it's
So,
really threatening.
yeah, it's your idea.
As a
It's your
Christian,
ground
right?
shaking.
That's your worldview. That's everything that matters. And so when somebody challenges that, whether they mean to or whether it's inadvertent, it's extremely threatening.
Yeah. Even for a guy like me, who I was willing, like I was a bad boy. I was willing, for a church kid, I was a bad boy, but I was willing to press the edges on all this theological boundaries. I thought smoking was fine, whatever. I thought God was more of a big picture kind of guy than
Right.
your individual. But so like, even for being an edgy guy, if someone like almost hear like a bell ringing, like if someone touches that foundation, like, hey,
Yeah.
dude, that is off limits.
Yeah.
And if it's coming from someone that's part your family, someone
Yeah.
you grew up in a house with,
Yeah.
it's insulting on so many levels. Like, oh, you're disowning your family because you don't have the same worldview as me
Yeah.
exactly anymore.
Yeah.
It can be taken very hurtful, even if obviously unintended.
Yeah. Which is why it's difficult, even to this day, being as far removed from at least the version of Christianity that I grew up with. It's still difficult to talk about in any sort of a public forum because I'm hyper aware of the fact that there are people who would be hurt by the fact that I don't believe what I used to believe. And on some level, I don't care because it's my belief and
Sure.
But on another level, I'm sensitive to the fact that I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to cause anybody pain or discomfort.
Like, you don't have to lead with that.
Yeah, I don't generally introduce myself and say Travis Crafton, no longer a Christian.
Right.
It's a little more nuanced. It's a little more nuanced than that, I guess.
Man, it's funny because now I kind of have like that same thought as far as people's opinions about other people's sexual identity.
Yeah.
Like, man, why do you care so much? It's not like
yeah.
they're coming up to you, and even if they are dressing different, they're not dressing you different. They're not
Right.
dressing your kids. But it's the equivalent to like it's their sexual preference to be like, oh, that's Justin. He's a missionary guy. You know what I mean? Let's not talk to him. Like, let's cut him out of our life and even disown him from the family because he has this one that doesn't affect me at all. It has nothing to do with anything in my life.
Yeah.
But I think this thing about him is so important that I have to literally cut him out of my life because of, like I said, oh, he likes whatever.
Yeah.
The Alaskan chili dog.
Who was I talking to about this the other day? I think it was one of you two about how it, like, at some point you have to decide, like, some of those people believed that to not cut you out of your life, out of my life, would be approving of what you're doing and would cause you to have a fiery, painful eternity.
Yeah.
Like, they thought, well, if I don't cut him out, then I'm accepting it. But like, why would you? I just don't think that I could choose my religion over my kids.
Yeah.
Ever, for anything.
Yeah, and I know Justin and I have some shared acquaintances that grew up in the same type of fundamentalist evangelical background that came out as LGBTQ, one form or another. I'm the parent of LGBTQ children, so it's an issue that's particularly sensitive to me, and I know exactly what you mean, Justin. I don't I feel like if that development in my life had happened when I was still sort of a hardcore, member of that particular faith, that might have been the thing that pushed me out of it, because I don't know that I have it in me to reject my children in the way
Right.
that is expected to in certain, at least certain segments of evangelical Christianity.
But I mean, just by your generation, and also talking to you, you're more evolved socially and progressively in these ideas than a lot of the people, older than us or
Sure.
from that time frame had the possibility. Like they're maybe that's giving them a little bit too grace. They had the possibility, but not the real probability of accepting that worldview. It wasn't probable for them
No,
to think like you.
no, and the social oh, hit the spring on my microphone here. The social costs were infinitely higher back then,
Sure.
right? Like it's easy for my kids to meet gay and trans kids at school and not think anything about it, because it's, although not entirely accepted, much more accepted than it was 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 50 years ago when our parents were growing up. I mean, when my parents were kids, like, it was illegal, right? Like, there were
Yeah.
laws on the books that if you were gay and you got caught being gay, I mean, that's jail time.
5
Me and-
days in jail.
Me and Justin were
So you
talking
better
about
really
that.
be into it.
Yeah, me and Justin were talking about that. There's still books on the law in Kansas now that have been rewritten to mean something different now, but used to be anti-gay laws.
Yeah, right.
That's exactly what they were. It
Yeah.
was just,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't know, where were we at?
We were talking about how it's easier for
Yeah.
kids of this generation because the social costs are much lower to be accepting now than it was back
Right.
then.
Right. Yeah, and I think we're still finding the balancing act.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I think we are progressing, but I definitely don't think anyone or any of the big political or ideological sides have everything figured out.
Mm-mm.
There's, you know, kind of like, I think we get to at the foundation of all of this, whether it's religion or your worldview or like just it's going to come down to like personal accountability and personal ownership, like coming out of that. I say coming out of the passenger seat and going into the driver's seat, like you have to evaluate things on your own. Like just be, if there is going to be progress, and I think our generation time frame was maybe the first. I don't know where I'm going with that, because they're still progressing, but we were one of the first ones to really hit that wave of being able to question things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I kind of lost where I was going so much with that. But so growing up, what'd you do after high school?
So I after high school, I did I want to say about a year at a community college, Butler County, actually a couple community colleges. Um, and then went off to Emporia State for a semester, lived in an apartment with two dudes, and then started dating my wife, or my girlfriend at the time and soon to be fiance. So got tired of driving back and forth from Emporia every weekend. Came back to Wichita and got married, and then kind of put school on hold for a while because I had a wife now and needed some money, and then sort of balanced school and work off and on over the next few years until I got my degree.
Was mom and dad trying to push you in any direction as after school or in general?
Not really. I mean, I think I had talked about I had an interest in going into law enforcement. I didn't really take specific courses in that direction. But I was just kind of working on getting a bachelor's degree. And then I didn't really know exactly where I was going to go. I just had sort of, unofficial plans that I would, try to be a cop. And as I said before, my wife disabused me of that notion, and I wasn't too mad about it. But I didn't know what else I was going to do.
Looking back,
Well-
like with your evolved worldview now, looking back, do you think that you would have wanted to be a cop now? Like if you were graduating, coming out of there, were you trying? What was your plan for wanting to be a cop? Like why?
I ask myself that question all the time, honestly. It's almost like do you remember that movie Sliding Doors? It came out a long time ago, and it was the idea that your life can take a turn, and if you make this decision, then your life goes in this direction.
Yeah.
If you make that decision, your life goes in an entirely different direction. And so I have often wondered if I would have ended up on the same trajectory if I had ended up going into law enforcement. And I don't have an answer for it necessarily.
Yeah.
I think the reason I wanted to was just because it was kind of all I knew. Justin and I come from a big law enforcement family, right? Dad was a cop. Uncle and aunt were both police officers, and Justin ended up going into it. Our sister ended up going into law enforcement. So, and I did have a deep interest I've always been very justice minded. So I've always had a very deep sense of wanting to right the wrongs and wanting to help people who, either were taking advantage of people on the margins or the people who themselves were on the margins. Like I've always had a heart for trying to do right by those people, and I felt like law enforcement might be a way to do that. And also, I just loved, I loved cop movies. I love detective stories, and I always just thought it sounded like a badass job. And it is, right? Because some of the cops I know are some of the coolest, badassiest people I've ever met in my life. But I do wonder if I would have been soft in the ways that I am towards certain issues if I was confronted with the realities that police officers are often confronted with. Because I do think it's sort of easy to be a liberal when you're not staring down the barrel of life on the streets, right? So I don't know that one view is more valid than the other, but I think that probably it would have been a more difficult journey, I guess, if I hadn't taken the path that I took.
It's also easy to be a conservative when everyone looks like you, thinks like you, talks like you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Man,
Now,
I tell you what.
Real quick, what year was that, Travis? And what was your relationship with like mom and dad and the world? Like, were you like involved in the youth group at the time? Like,
yeah, I mean, I was always involved in youth group. When you say my relationship with mom and dad relative to what? To wanting to be a police officer?
No, just in general. Like you got along with them well, good relationship.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I remember by the time I got a job in a car, I was kind of doing my own thing most of the time. I still obviously, mom and dad had some limits that they put on us, and I generally observed those limits. I won't say that I never went outside the lines. But yeah, we generally had a good relationship. I don't remember fighting with them an awful lot. I don't remember them really giving me a hard time about too much. So yeah, I would say it was, I don't have a ton of negative memories from that time in my life.
And what year was it?
Well, I graduated in '93, so I went off to I went to Emporia State in '95, spent a semester up there, and then came back in '96 and got married.
Just as a frame of reference, 93 is, I believe, the year that Use Your Illusion Volume 1 came out. Volume
Sounds
4, I
about
believe, came out in 94. So
sounds
if
about
somebody
right.
needs a frame of reference for what years we're talking about, that's
Yeah.
it.
The all I remember is that the blue record was better than the red record.
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah.
blue record had the original lyrics to, or no, maybe I'm getting this wrong. The blue record had Civil War on it.
Yep.
And I think it had the original lyrics to Don't Cry,
Yep.
and the alternate lyrics were on the red album. So the blue one was superior in terms of Guns N' Roses products.
The Red Album had one song on it that was really good, but I don't remember what it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, you're getting ready to say something, Clayton?
Oh no, I was hanging on the edge of my seat.
It was Guns N' Roses lore. I didn't know we were gonna go there.
No, I wonder, like, so you haven't. It sounds like you haven't thrown the baby out with the bathwater. Like you haven't gone too far. You're just. What I want to know is, like, since now you don't identify as that conservative, at least not socially or politically
Yeah.
anymore. Have you, like, forced yourself? Have you changed your view on guns, or, like, obviously your views on same-sex marriages or same-sex
Sure.
relationships has changed, but, like,
Yeah.
guns or voting or immigration, has everything changed? Or
it's probably to some degree, yes. I don't know that there's, and again, apologies to any of my conservative friends out there. I don't know that there's a lot that we have common ground on these days. In terms of the issues that you brought up, like, as far as guns go, I believe that people should be allowed to have guns, but I think they should be much more difficult to get than they are.
sure.
I would love to see. I would love to see the type of response that the NYPD gave to that murdered CEO every time there's a school shooting.
Yep.
So, I don't think I'm as far left as one can be on the topic of guns, but I'm certainly much further left than a lot of my Republican friends.
I'd say that sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah, it seems like a reasonable position that children should not be murdered in school, but
Well, even with guns, I've had the idea. I know a lot of people do. I almost think of it like a car. Like, yes, you can own a car, but
Sure.
to bring your car in public, you have to pass a test, homie. And we have to know that you're not doing this when you're drunk, that you got
Right.
enough sleep,
Yep.
that you're
we
not
need to
taking
know who owns
prescriptions.
that car.
Yep,
Like,
exactly.
Yeah.
And maybe even pay a registration tax on. Well,
Yeah.
no, that's too far. That's a bridge too. That's a bridge.
Now, there's also an expectation that you've trained and occasionally retrained
Yep.
or been retested on that.
Certification. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need
Just
to
like a
show
car.
that you need to show that you're not going to accidentally kill 3 people in the grocery store when you're trying to shoot the bad guy.
Or,
Yeah.
man, I've when I was a hardcore conservative, or just maybe a harder core libertarian, that's kind of what I identify as now, as a libertarian.
Yeah.
But even then, not totally.
Yeah.
I would think there's no such thing as a non-permissive zone. Like, if it's in the United States of America, it's a permissive zone.
Yeah.
But now I find myself in a non-permissive zone, and I follow the rules. So I don't carry in these non-permissive zones.
Yeah.
But I've found, like, different. One time I thought I was going to get carjacked, and I was in the parking lot of this non-permissive zone. So I didn't have my gun on me. And this van screeched up and stopped in front of me. And it was like 10 o'clock at night, pitch black parking lot. I'm a former cop, so I think of the worst thing possible. Like, oh, I'm about to get carjacked, and I don't have my gun. Turns out it was this little old lady that was cussing me because I caught her stealing earlier. And I was thinking, thank God I didn't have my gun because I would have drawn it and put it in her face.
Yeah.
If someone screeched out in front of me, and I promise I could have articulated, they had opportunity, ability, and intent. At least in my view, my life was threatened.
Yeah.
In the real world, it wasn't.
Right.
You know what I mean? It at least it ended up not being that way. But man, it could have.
Yeah.
So, like, just in that situation, there needs to be something. There needs to be some systematic halt. Like, even go back to the most ancient times, there were all this democracy. I'm thinking of like ancient Greece, where like a lot of the Stoic bros like to claim their heritage from.
Mm-hmm.
Even back then, you had to lock up your arms when you came into the city.
Sure.
That's what part of
Yeah.
Socrates' argument was based on.
Watch any Western, and that's the
Hang up
first
the
thing
guns.
that's the first thing they did when they walked into town was hand over their guns.
Yeah.
But so what would you say then to somebody that says shall not be infringed?
It's a tough argument to overcome because we can't get into the heads of the guys who wrote it almost 300 years ago.
But you agree that they weren't talking about hunting.
What? Who? Me?
No, the founding fathers. Like, I guess I'm T-Pac. The founding, like, we don't have to know what they were thinking to know that they weren't talking about hunting.
Right. I don't think they were. I think and I'm not a constitutional scholar, but I did watch Hamilton.
Okay.
And I think that they were trying to prevent a tyrannical government from being able to stop the public from defending themselves. I think where that breaks down now is I don't think they had any concept of the type of firepower that we as humans were going to create.
Right.
And I don't think that for me the argument that the founding fathers proclaimed that I should be able to carry any gun that I want because I need to be able to protect myself from the government sort of falls apart when you remember that predator drones exist. And your AR-15 is not, if the government wants to get you, they're gonna get you.
Yeah. You're right. But also Afghanistan proved that, and Vietnam proved that ill-equipped but well-motivated enemies
Sure.
can still take down the biggest war machine in the world, or
Absolutely.
at least halt us.
Yeah.